She was the undisputed queen of 80s rock, a leather-clad warrior with a voice that could shatter glass and a stare that could burn through steel. Pat Benatar was an icon, a trailblazer who kicked the door down for every female rocker who followed. But the powerful image the world fell in love with was a carefully constructed illusion, one that she secretly hated. The truth is, the woman who sang "Love is a Battlefield" was living in one. Her entire career was a brutal, behind-the-scenes war against the very people who made her famous. This is the story of the fight she had to win to become herself. Her journey didn't start in a smoky rock club. It started in an opera hall. Born Patricia Andrzejewski in Long Island, she was a classically trained coloratura soprano. Her voice was pristine, her technique flawless. Her ambition wasn't to be a rock goddess, it was to be the next Julie Andrews. By 19, she was married to her high school sweetheart and working as a bank teller, her powerful voice confined to nights and weekends. Life was stable, predictable, and suffocating. Something inside her knew this wasn't her story. In a move that shocked her family, she quit her job, left her husband, and moved to New York City to chase an impossible dream. She had no connections, no plan, just a voice that was too big to be contained by teller windows in suburban life. It was at the legendary comedy club Catch a Rising Star that her life changed forever. But she wasn't discovered in her signature leather and spandex. It was Halloween night, and she showed up in a vampire costume from a sci-fi B-movie. The moment she opened her mouth, the room fell silent. That night, the juxtaposition of her theatrical costume and her powerhouse voice created a spark. It was the birth of a persona. The industry executives who saw her didn't just see a singer, they saw a product they could mold, market, and control. And that's exactly what they planned to do. But what they didn't know was that a quiet force was about to enter her life, one that would give her the strength to fight back. When Pat Benatar signed with Chrysalis Records, the label had a clear vision for her. They wanted a female Elvis, a solo star draped in sex appeal. They needed a sound, a sonic identity that was as tough and seductive as the image they were building. So they brought in a brilliant, fiery guitarist from Cleveland named Neil Giraldo. He wasn't just a guitar player, he was an architect of sound. He took Pat's raw vocal power and framed it with jagged, explosive riffs and unforgettable melodies. He created the sound of Heartbreaker. He was the engine behind the music. The label loved the results, but they had a problem. Giraldo wasn't just a hired gun. He and Pat had an undeniable chemistry, musically and personally. They were becoming a unit, a partnership. This was a nightmare for the record executives. They wanted a solo act, not a duo. A band was complicated. A single, marketable female star was a goldmine. According to Benatar's own memoir, the label actively tried to push Giraldo out. They wanted to reduce him to a footnote in her story, a nameless face in the band. They told her he was replaceable, that she was the star, and he was just the guitar player. They fundamentally misunderstood what they had. Pat and Neil weren't just colleagues, they were two halves of the same artistic soul. She knew, even then, that without him, the magic was gone. She put her foot down, issuing an ultimatum. Neil stays or I go. It was the first major battle of her career and a prelude to the war to come. By fighting for him, she was really fighting for her own artistic life. And their bond, forged in that defiance, would soon be needed to face down a storm of controversy. As her fame exploded, Pat refused to be just the tough girl caricature the label was selling. She was a thoughtful, observant artist, and what she saw in the world around her began to bleed into her music. In 1980, she came across a harrowing series of articles in the New York Times detailing the silent epidemic of child abuse in America. She was horrified and felt compelled to give a voice to the voiceless. The result was one of the most daring and controversial songs of her career, Hell is for Children. With its haunting melody and chilling lyrics, the song was a direct confrontation of a topic nobody in pop or rock music wanted to touch. The backlash was immediate and severe. Radio stations across the country refused to play it. Family and parent groups labeled it disturbing and inappropriate. Advertisers threatened to pull their support from any station that gave it airtime. The label was terrified, begging her to drop it from her albums and live shows. They had built her into a rock and roll sex symbol, and now she was singing about society's darkest taboo. It was commercial suicide. But Pat didn't flinch. She and Neil opened every single concert with that song for years. It was a declaration. It was her way of telling the world and her own label that she was more than a product. She was an artist with a conscience, and she would not be silenced. This act of artistic defiance proved her courage, but her biggest fight was still ahead, a fight against the very machine that had created her. By 1981, Pat Benatar was one of the biggest stars in the world. She was a Grammy winner, a platinum-selling artist, and a cornerstone of the new music television channel MTV. From the outside, she was living the dream. On the inside, she was living a nightmare. She felt trapped by her contract with Chrysalis Records, a deal she had signed when she was young and unknown. She claimed the label was withholding royalties and treating her and Neil unfairly. But more than the money, it was about control. They still pushed the sex symbol image she loathed. They still tried to minimize Neil's contributions. She felt like a pawn in their corporate game, and she had had enough. So, at the absolute peak of her fame, she did the unthinkable. She went on strike. She refused to go back into the studio to record the follow-up to her smash album Crimes of Passion. The label was stunned. This wasn't supposed to happen. Artists were supposed to be grateful. Instead, she filed a massive lawsuit to break her contract, citing unfair practices. It was an audacious gamble. She was risking everything: her momentum, her career, her financial future. The legal battle was long and brutal. The press painted it as a greedy rock star, wanting more. But for Pat, it was a fight for freedom. She described the feeling of being legally bound to the label as bondage. She was willing to burn it all down rather than continue making music under their thumb. After a bitter struggle, she finally won, renegotiating a new, more equitable contract. This victory was monumental, and it poured rocket fuel on the creative fire that would produce her most iconic statement ever. Fresh off her victory against the label, Pat was creatively supercharged. She was ready to make a statement that was entirely her own, and it came in the form of 1983's Love is a Battlefield. The song itself was a synth-driven rock anthem, but its music video transformed it into a cultural phenomenon. It wasn't just a performance video, it was a short film, a narrative of a young woman escaping a repressive home to find her own way in the world. This story was deeply personal. The stern, unyielding father in the video was a direct reflection of her own father, whose traditional views she had fought against her whole life. The video's climactic scene, where she leads a group of dance hall women in a defiant, synchronized dance against their exploitative boss, was pure empowerment. It was one of the first music videos to feature choreographed, synchronized dancing combined with a dramatic plot, and it became an absolute sensation on MTV. The Battlefield dance became legendary. The video was a powerful feminist statement, a story of female solidarity and rebellion against patriarchal control. It was Pat Benatar taking all the frustration from her legal battles, all the anger from being controlled, and channeling it into a 3-minute masterpiece. She wasn't just singing about a battlefield, she had lived on one for years. The video won her a Grammy and cemented her status not just as a rock star, but as a visionary artist who could use the new medium of television to tell a powerful story. But even as she celebrated this win, another one of her biggest hits was about to become a source of deep personal conflict. For decades, one song was synonymous with Pat Benatar's defiant spirit, "Hit Me With Your Best Shot." It was her stadium-shaking anthem, a taunt to her critics, and a battle cry for her fans. The lyric "Fire Away" was screamed back at her by sold-out arenas every night. It was an indispensable part of her legacy, which is why it's so shocking that today she refuses to sing it. In recent years, Benatar made a quiet but firm decision to remove the song from her setlist. Her reason is both heartbreaking and a testament to her character. She explained in an interview that in the face of the constant and horrific mass shootings plaguing America, she can no longer in good conscience stand on a stage and encourage thousands of people to shout the words "fire away." She said the lyric feels disrespectful and flippant flippant in light of the real-life violence and loss families are experiencing. She acknowledged that the song's title is a metaphor, but for her, the connection is now too painful. It's a stunning act of principle. At a point in her career where most legacy artists simply play the hits and cash the checks, Pat Benatar is willing to disappoint some fans in order to stand by her convictions. It shows that the same rebellious spirit that fought a record label and championed controversial topics is still alive and well. She remains an artist who puts her conscience before her commerce. This integrity would be the defining feature of her final and longest battle. For an artist who has sold millions of albums, won 4 Grammys, and fundamentally changed the role of women in rock music, one honor remained elusive: a place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. For years, she and Neil Giraldo were eligible, and for years, they were snubbed. It became a glaring omission, a point of outrage for fans and critics alike. The institution seemed to be overlooking the sheer scale of their impact. They weren't just a band, they were a cultural force. Her voice and his guitar had defined the sound of a decade. The snub felt personal. Many believed it was because the Hall of Fame, like her old record label, struggled to see them as a partnership. They saw Pat Benatar, the solo star, and couldn't reconcile the reality that she and Neil were an indivisible unit. The fan campaigns grew louder every year. The question, "Why isn't Pat Benatar in the Hall of Fame?" became a recurring headline. It was the last ghost of the old industry mindset they had fought so hard against. Finally, in 2022, the call came. Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo were to be inducted. When they took the stage to accept the honor, it was a moment of ultimate vindication. It wasn't just an award for the music, it was recognition for their year fight to have their partnership acknowledged. Standing there together, they had finally won the last battle. Pat Benatar's story is so much more than a list of hit songs. It's the story of a fighter, the classically trained singer who had to become a warrior, the woman they tried to turn into a poster who insisted on being an artist. She fought for her creative partner when the industry tried to cast him aside. She fought for difficult, meaningful songs when the world wanted simple hits. She fought for her own name and her own freedom when a corporation tried to own her. Her legacy isn't just in the music, it's in the quiet strength and loud defiance she showed the world. She proved that the battlefield for an artist's soul is often fought in boardrooms and courtrooms, far from the stage lights. And Pat Benatar, the girl from Long Island with the operatic voice, never ever backed down from a fight.